Denmark is a weird place. A country that runs solely on pastries, bikes, and passive-aggressive silence. A place where people leave their babies outside in freezing temperatures and call it building character. A place where happiness is so fanatically mandatory they invented a whole word, hygge, just to describe the feeling of being cosy, warm, and emotionally suppressed. And God help you if you're not an alcoholic, because I went out with some Danish friends one night, and after trying to politely decline shot number 7, I was put into what can only be described as an emotional hostage situation. All in all, great time. This is, after all, the country that gave us such classics as Man Meets the Sea, a monument of 4 30-feet-tall naked white dudes sitting by the beach staring into the void like their group chat just got leaked. And John Dillermand, a children's TV show about a man with a dangerously long sentient penis that he uses to help people in everyday life. Yes, it's a children's show apparently. But every now and then, Denmark coughs up someone who absolutely refuses to vibe. Someone whose entire existence feels like it was written by a screenwriter with an ongoing brain aneurysm. And the only reason that I found out about him was because one night when I was scrolling, as you do, I stumbled upon a random article about a Danish astronomer who died because he absolutely refused to get up and go for a pee. Naturally, I lost the entire night spiralling through his life, which felt like a Renaissance acid trip. The result? Angry kings, gold noses, drunk pet moosies, and literal duels over disagreements about mathematics. Tycho Brahe. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Oh hey cutie. What's that? What am I doing? I'm just getting my bikini body ready. For my hubby. You know how it is. He wants me to be presentable for the Pride March. Oh wait, you've not met him? Sure you have. He is the gold standard in flavoured air devices. Of course you know him. He's Fume. Today's sponsor is indeed none other than Fume, the premier in flavoured air that has one simple mission: to help you rid yourself of that one bad habit. With its exquisitely tempered and tasteful wooden frame, Fume is nothing short of a blissfully soothing suck when you feel its rock-hard wood glide across your lips. And with no electronics or yucky chemicals, you needn't worry about anything getting between you and a good suck. It even has inbuilt fidget capabilities so you can crank and squeeze it as much as he wants. But hey, it ain't the only motion in this ocean. As with Fume, you get a wide and expertly curated catalogue of flavour cores to tickle your tonsils with. From crisp mint, cinnamon hearts, and orange vanilla, to my personal preference, black licorice. I can say with certainty that there's definitely a flavour for you. So grab that old vape and make it contemplate a higher power. As with Fume, you won't be needing it anymore. So come and join me and 500,000 other fabulous Fumelings this Pride Month, and you can scan the QR code on the screen or go to tryfume.com/Dankula for a free topper with your journey pack. Again, scan the QR code on the screen or go to tryfume.com/Dankula for a free topper with your journey pack. Thank you Fume for once again sponsoring these videos. I really miss you, please call me back, I love. Before all of the batshit crazy stuff that I mentioned in the intro, let's go back a little. Our story begins on the 14th of December 1546 in Denmark. A boy was born to the noble Brahe family. A bunch of aristocrats who owned land, titles, and enough pride that you could smell their farts from a mile away. The boy was named Tige Ottesen Brahe, later shortened to the cooler-sounding Tico. Now, parenting in the 16th century was a bit lax. So when Tico was just 2 years old, he was essentially kidnapped by his uncle Jorgen Tigesen Brahe. We're already off to a great start. Uncle Jorgen and his wife Inger Oxy were childless, and they figured why not just take one from his brother. And Tico's parents didn't really seem to care, because in the grand scheme of things, they were just like, we can just make more. And boy did they, because they managed to pump out 10 more children, and 8 of them actually managed to reach adulthood. And for the 16th century, that's pretty good. Considering that Uncle Jorgen was the type of person to literally claim a child at a family reunion, he was far from a villain. He raised Tico like his own son, giving him a life of privilege and ensured Tico received education in Latin, rhetoric, and other subjects befitting of a nobleman. Tico later wrote, "He raised me and generously provided for me during his life until my 18th year. He always treated me as his own son and made me his heir." Uncle Jorgen was a proper Danish aristocrat, a naval commander under King Frederick II, no less. And like all of them, he had plans for young Tico. Law school. Because if you live in 16th century Europe and you're not becoming a bishop, you're studying law. So, at the age of 12, Tico was sent to the University of Copenhagen to start his studies in law. Being sent to uni at the age of just 12 was actually pretty normal for the 16th century. And on August the 21st, 1560, something happened that would change the course of his life. A solar eclipse. And not just any solar eclipse, but a predicted one. Tico saw the sun disappear and he realised that somehow some very, very smart people knew in advance that that would happen. And boom, his mind was fucking blown. He was hooked. He basically said to himself, I want to be a very, very smart guy who calculates that shit. And so he steered his life down that path. He started collecting and reading everything that he could about astronomy. He bought books, he tracked the stars at night, and he started annoying every professor in a 100-mile radius. But of course, this wasn't the career that his family had planned for him. Uncle Jorgen wanted a civil servant, not a gay stargazer. But Tico was stubborn. At the age of 15, he was sent to Leipzig in Germany to continue his law studies, and tagging along with him was his mentor, Anders Sorensen Vedel, a respected Danish historian and poet who was supposed to keep him focused on law, bureaucracy, and whatever the fuck passed for office politics back then. But at one point, little Tico worked his magic. He convinced Vedel to let him study astronomy in secret, which for Tico most likely meant being very, very open and loud about it, because eventually he just fully leaned into it. He began a tour through European universities, drifting further and further from law and deeper into the abyss of astronomy, as he started studying at Wittenberg, Rostock, Basel, and Augsburg. And he wasn't just studying, he started building. He built giant instruments. He built sextants, he built pre-telescope gear for charting, and many other types of tools and measuring devices that all ended up being stupidly accurate. In Augsburg, he built a giant brass quadrant that was so big it needed a small team of men just to move it around. And he was barely in his 20s. And during that time, he also made one of his first ever scientific contributions. He noticed that the planetary tables at the time were kind of shit. The predictions were wrong, they didn't match the sky, and the measurements were trash. Tico decided that only repeated and autistically precise observation could fix it. No guessing, no shortcuts, just data collected night by night. Life at that point was going pretty well for Tycho. But in 1565, tragedy struck. His beloved Uncle Jorgen, the man who had raised him and supported him, passed away. The details are a little bit murky and it's considered more of a legend than a historical fact, but the story was that one night King Frederick II himself, being an alcoholic like any other fellow Danishman worth his salt, got extremely drunk and fell into the canal in Copenhagen. Uncle Jorgen, ever loyal and ever noble, jumped in after him to try and save this royal retard. And he did save him. But Denmark, being what it is, fucking freezing and constantly moist, Jorgen caught pneumonia from the freezing water. And it ended up killing him. Tycho, emotionally devastated, decided to take a bit of a turn in his life. And in 1566, he headed back to the University of Rostock, this time to study medicine. But medicine wasn't just leeches and balancing the humours at that time. Alchemy also played a huge role in it as well, and Tycho fucking loved it. Healing alchemy, herbal remedies, distilling God fucking knows what from God fucking knows where, it all made sense to a guy who had already spent a lot of his time obsessing over stars. Now, university life can be a bit wild. I'm sure that a lot of you nerds went to one and you had nights of drinking, arguing, and fighting. But unlike Tycho, you at least didn't lose a body part over it. Tycho and his cousin, Manderup Parsberg, got into a drunken argument at an engagement party over who was better at mathematics. And they decided to settle this disagreement in the only way that a serious academic could at the time. A fucking sword duel in the dark. The result, well, Tycho ended up with a solid chunk of his nose just cut fucking straight off. Not all of it, but enough of it to make it an interesting conversation starter at parties. The best part, though, is that Tycho and Manderup actually became good friends afterwards. Like, hey bro, I know that you literally made me look like a ghoul from Fallout, but it's cool, let's have dinner later. Manderup even went on to marry Tycho's distant cousin, Anne Pedersdatter Brahe. Tycho, of course, couldn't just go around with a literal hole in his face, though. So he went DIY mode and made himself a fake nose. Multiple ones, actually, all for different occasions, with his most well-known nose being made of gold, which he wore only for special occasions. The nose stuck. Literally, because he had to literally glue it to his face. And people started to recognise him by his weird nose, and it became a rather iconic part of his character. In 1567, gold nose in hand, Tycho returned home from university. Now, most nobles at that point would settle down, marry some sad-eyed aristocrat girl, and push papers for the royal family. But not him. He wanted to do full-time astronomy. He was rich, bored, curious, and eccentric, and his family didn't stop him. Most likely due to them still being preoccupied with the ongoing war with Sweden. So he kept travelling. He went to Augsburg again, where, of course, he built another enormous 16 feet tall quadrant. He followed that up with trips to Basel and Freiburg and basically started nerding out all over Europe. But in 1570, tragedy struck again. His father, Otto Brahe, became ill, and Tycho rushed back home to see him. And by May of 1571, Otto was dead. Around the same time, the war with Sweden had finally ended and Denmark could breathe easy. And again, Tycho had a choice. Follow in his father's footsteps, or keep being insane. He chose insane. At that time, another uncle, fucking hell, there are so many uncles in here, named Steen Billy, entered into his life. And he was one of the more chill Brahes, and like Tycho, he didn't really give a fuck about titles or politics. And he had a passion for alchemy as well. So together, they built an observatory and alchemical laboratory at Heravad Abbey. And there, Tycho was assisted by his younger sister Sophie Brahe, who was a genius in her own right. Being a mathematician, herbalist, and alchemist, she helped Tycho with everything from astronomical calculations to preparing potions that could probably kill a man with the smallest whiff. And then came the big break. King Frederick II, the same drunk dipshit who fell into the canal, realised that Tycho wasn't just some rich weirdo with a glued-on nose, and he wanted to invest in the madness. So, what did he do? Well, he offered Tycho not just his very own observatory, but a whole fucking island. The island of Fenn. Some prime Scandinavian real estate right in the middle of the Øresund. Quiet, isolated, and no neighbours to complain about your loud, drunken celestial calculations. Just Tycho, his apprentices, and all of the alcohol that his liver could process. He named the observatory Uraniborg, meaning Castle of the Heavens. And the whole island was actually worth 1% of Denmark's entire fucking national budget. He was literally the 1%. But Uraniborg was just the beginning. Tycho turned the entire island into his personal science playground. He employed assistants, mathematicians, alchemists, blacksmiths, artisans, papermakers, printers, glassblowers, and even his own personal brewer. Because doing science can get you thirsty sometimes. Uraniborg itself was decked out with murals, astrological symbols, and lavish interiors. It had its own printing press pumping out works about his scientific research. The gardens also weren't just for show. They were very, very carefully designed based on celestial geometry, and also stocked with plants that he used for his alchemical experiments. Later down the line, the wind itself started to piss him off, so he just said fuck the weather and dug a whole arse second observatory underground, naming it Stjerneborg, meaning Castle of the Stars. The entire island ran like it was fucking science Hogwarts under the absolute rule of a drunk gold-nosed headmaster. There were rules, schedules, and expectations, of course, but there was also constant lavish parties. Tycho loved to party, and he didn't half-arse it. Banquets, music, dancing, and alcohol consumption were almost constant. Nobles, scholars, and aristocrats from all over Europe visited for the intellectual conversations, but they left stumbling drunk down the stairs. Speaking of which, one of the most infamous stories from the island involved Tycho's pet moose. Yes, he had a pet moose. No, I don't know why, stop asking questions. But anyway, the moose lived in the mansion like a weird dog with horns that would just follow him around. And it was no ordinary moose. It fucking loved alcohol. This moose absolutely loved getting hammered, which is probably why Tycho vibed with it so much. Tycho would actually bring the moose to parties, and on one night, the poor moose got absolutely blasted on beer and tried to climb a set of stairs, before promptly tripping over and falling down said stairs, and then dying because it broke its fucking neck. A noble beast taken out by alcohol and astronomy. Then there was Jeppe, Tycho's very close friend, who was also his, and yes, I'm being completely fucking serious, psychic dwarf jester that lived under his desk. Jeppe wasn't just comic relief. He was known for making predictions that unnervingly came true. Whether he actually had the second sight or was just sober and observant compared to everyone else around him is up for debate. Jeppe would wander around the island roasting assistants and muttering cosmic wisdom while everyone just did their best not to trip over him. He created a living, breathing community of intellectuals, craftsmen, labourers, servants, and eccentric nutjobs just like him, who were all most likely completely fucking wasted 24/7. Now, his relationship with them was a little bit complicated. Tycho could be generous, of course. He trained assistants and he mentored young scholars just like others had done for him. And he gave them access to tools and data that nobody else had in Europe. Many of his students went on to become respected scientists in their own right. But he also ruled with an iron nose. He didn't take criticism very well, and he actually once beat a carpenter for not building something fast enough. He fined peasants for walking too close to the observatory, and this is only an allegation, he even built a whole fucking dungeon just for the use of sobering up assistants and visiting nobles. He treated the island like his own kingdom and its people as his subjects. And most of them were not fans of it. Now, somewhere amid the drunk moose and the cosmic dwarf who was connected to the fucking warp, Tycho settled down with a woman named Kirsten Jorgensdatter. She was a commoner, which was very not cool for noble standards. But Tycho didn't give a fuck. They lived together for decades. They had 8 children together and basically told nobility to fuck off. She ran the household, probably keeping Tycho from spontaneously combusting while surrounded by drunk nobles, workers, a psychic dwarf, and the lingering smell of moose piss. One can only dream of a woman like that. Somehow, though, everything worked. Tycho was clocking planetary orbits, measuring the stars with god-tier precision, and writing volumes of data that would go on to revolutionize astronomy. He measured the supernova of 1572, and, to the horror of the church authorities, proved that the heavens were not unchanging. The stars could change. The sky wasn't perfect and eternal, and this discovery alone launched a scientific revolution. Tycho was obsessive and he demanded perfection in his craft. Instruments were adjusted to the fraction of a millimeter. He logged thousands of measurements, all by hand, mind you, and every single star was charted, every single error was hunted down and corrected. He was just a walking human spreadsheet before spreadsheets were even a thing. So, despite the island being a chaotic utopia of stars, alcohol, psychic midgets, and dead megafauna, it did produce some of the most accurate astronomical data in human history up to that point. In fact, it was so good, so detailed, and so reliable that it became the foundation for the works of Johannes Kepler, who I will get into shortly, and eventually Isaac Newton. Without Tycho's numbers and data, we probably wouldn't know what the fuck a planetary orbit even looks like. Now, remember how I mentioned that peasants were not a big fan of him? Well, they really didn't give a single fuck about all of that nerd shit, and they just wanted to not be taxed into the dirt. So they slowly started to rebel. Back in the royal court, King Frederick II, the guy that was funding the entire project, died in 1588. His son, Christian IV, took over and was very, very, very unimpressed with this random lunatic beer-bonging state funds for all of his parties. Tycho's grip on the island started to slip, the complaints from the locals started to pile up, and the new king had had enough. By 1597, Tycho lost his royal funding, and he was ultimately forced to pack his shit up and leave the island. He was wandering in search of patronage and eventually found himself in Prague under the rule of Rudolf II, who was a fan of science, alchemy, and the occult. So he was right up Tycho's alley. Tycho took up the position of imperial mathematician, and that job came with a very generous salary, an imperial palace as his residence, and the freedom to do whatever the fuck he wanted. But with age catching up, Tycho began taking on collaborators, most notably Johannes Kepler, a very well-known German mathematician and astronomer who would later become famous for formulating the 3 laws of planetary motion. This is the very same Kepler that the Kepler telescope is named after. He also has whole planets and whole fucking stars named after him. That is how important he was to astronomy. He and Tycho's relationship was somewhat complicated, however. Tycho, being the control freak that he was, believed that science should have a chain of command. Ideally one where he was at the top. Kepler, being famous for having zero fucking chill, really could not care less about who was in charge. He just wanted data. And he needed Tycho's treasure trove of astronomical observations to validate his theories. But Tycho wasn't handing over his research that easily. Still, Kepler moved in with Tycho, and in between all of the arguments and data hoarding, they actually managed to move astronomy forward by centuries. As the collaboration with Kepler was going on in Prague, Tycho wasn't done stirring up shit. He kept talking mad shit about Christian IV, hosting flashy drinking banquets, and leaning a little bit too much into his ego like always. He managed observatory work, kept in touch with scientists all across Europe, and he still managed to find the time to annoy the absolute fuck out of Kepler, who really deserved a lot of the credit for a lot of the work that was being done. And then came the infamous piss banquet. The entire reason that I even started researching this video. At one of Rudolf's dinner parties, Tycho, ever the pretentious noble, and after probably downing an ungodly amount of alcohol like he usually does, instead of politely excusing himself to go and drain the cosmic lizard, he just sat there with his bladder swelling like a balloon. Because at that time in history, among posh people, especially at the king's banquet, it would have been a breach of etiquette to get up and just go to the fucking toilet. At first, it was just uncomfortable. But by dessert, it was a full-blown medical crisis. When Tycho returned home, he was actually no longer able to take a piss, except in very small amounts and with excruciating pain. The poor bastard had accidentally started a slow, agonising death, most likely due to a bladder rupture or a brutal urinary tract infection. And so, Tycho Brahe, the man who built celestial castles and revolutionised astronomy, basically exploded from the inside out because he was too fucking polite to just say, "Excuse me, I need to go and pee." The man died of piss. Bedridden and in constant pain, he spent the last of his days suffering. Doctors, physicians, and alchemists all tried everything they could to heal him, but nothing worked. His final words reportedly were, "I hope I didn't seem to have lived in vain." He wrote his own epitaph where he said, "He lived like a sage and died like a fool." And he finally died on October the 24th, 1601, at the age of 54. His funeral was elaborate, but his legacy even more so. Kepler was finally able to get his hands on those numbers he was looking for after Tycho's death, and he used them to demolish the age-old belief that planetary orbits were perfect circles. Kepler formulated his first and second laws of planetary motion, that planets orbit the sun in ellipses and sweep out equal areas in equal times. Later, he would add the third law, linking a planet's orbital period to its distance from the sun. These weren't just upgrades, they actually changed science and the understanding of the universe forever. Basically, Tycho didn't discover the laws of planetary motion, but his findings did make them possible. He wasn't exactly the father of modern astronomy. He was a lot more the very, very drunken alcoholic but good-hearted uncle who gave it a roof over its head and a booze-covered toolkit that helped change the understanding of the universe. Today he is remembered as a pioneer and a fucking weirdo. He didn't get all of the answers right, but he did change the way that the questions were asked. And while his personal story does read like a fucking science fever dream, his contribution to science remains everlasting, with all of the mistakes just as valuable as his successes. In fact, a lot of them paved the way for something greater. His life is a reminder that even if you're a star-obsessed nerd charting the cosmos, you can still throw an absolute fucking baller booze-soaked rager with a literal dancing psychic midget and a fucking dead moose and still go down as the most unhinged scientist to ever piss on the boundaries of science and sanity.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube! Everybody just subscribe!